Alright, so this is going to be part 1 to What If Asta Had Time Magic Redone. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. 'Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so I haven't done this series in a long time. I wanted to redo it since the other parts are at an earlier stage of my channel and where I didn't really edit too much. So there's a lot of, I guess, stops in flow, or it doesn't really go well if you listen to it. If you listen to my new stuff compared to my old, it's just kind of annoying to hear all those pauses, so I wanted to redo it. In this case, I'm going to try to do from the beginning of the series all the way to the attack on the capital, so it goes over every kind of part that I did for the previous series. Now this isn't going to go directly off of that series, so this is a remake, so I'm going to change some things here and there, but there are going to be some elements that I take from the previous one. So with that being said, let's get into the story. Now Asta, when he's young, he's not going to really have an idea of what his magic like element is or attribute is. So in this case, he's going to still train just as much as he did in canon, because he doesn't know his elemental attribute. He doesn't know whether or not he would need his physical ability. And because he wants to be the Wizard King, he would want to have every chance to get a better league in front of Yuno, because obviously Yuno doesn't really train physically, at least from what we've seen in the manga and anime. So years would go by, and the day and where eventually he would get his grimoire, and at the kind of ceremony, Yuno would get the glowing grimoire that you know, that being the 4-leaf clover for wind magic, while Asta gets one sliver of paper. And you might be asking yourself, if you don't remember, why is that? Well, because he has time magic, he has infinite possibilities and thus has no cover, just like Julius. Now Asta is kind of embarrassed, as he had this kind of entire speech ready to talk to Yuno about how his magic's going to be better than everyone else's, or better at least than Yuno, and how he's going to be the Wizard King. And Asta still says that to a certain extent, but he kind of lost a little bit of his confidence there, talking to Yuno, saying that even though I have one cover or one page in my grimoire, I will still beat you, right? And Asta reads his, paper, and it says that he has time magic. And Asta almost freaks out. He tells the rest of the church that he got time magic. Now this is very powerful, as no one there has really heard of anyone getting time magic, as you know, that being a very rare ability. So they are happy for him, but at the same time kind of confused on why he only has one paper or one page in his grimoire, thinking that if his magic is so powerful, why doesn't he have more than one page? And at this point, people would know that Asta would have a lot of magic within him, because even though they don't know his magical element, they would still feel the mana within him, just how Yuno is. We would get to the point in where Asta and Yuno would kind of go their kind of separate ways a bit to see and look at their grimoires. This is where this is where Yuno would get trapped by the two nobles, and they would threaten him while Yuno just basically knocks him away as if they're nothing. But before he could actually do that, this is where the chain mage, the criminal from the purple orcas, comes in and chains up both of the nobles and goes for Yuno as well. Now he chains up Yuno. He wants to sell off his 4-leaf grimoire, as it's a rare item and it could get him a lot of profit. Now, Yuno is kind of, trying to keep calm, as he's not really able to do much at this point. This is where Asta comes in. Now, him having his only spell, what is he going to do? Now, for this first spell, I want to give him Chronostasis. This is the spell that you see the Wizard King use the most, and where he's able to just kind of capture something and then either fling it back at someone or just stop it in its tracks. Now you might be asking yourself, well, that's his spell, why does Asta have it? We know that people can have similar spells or even the same spell, even if they have, different parents and different, lineages. We see this a lot with things like spatial magic, fire users, just name it. There's going to be people that have the same kind of spell, maybe with a different name. So if you guys don't want Asta's spell to have that name, you guys can tell me down below. So Asta, he basically announces that he's going to save Yuno and is going to be the Wizard King. The Chain Mage sees that Asta has one page within his grimoire and laughs at him. Tells him like, how is someone like you going to beat me when you only have one page? So Asta rushes and tries to go for the mage, but the mage tries to shoot out his chains. This is when Asta uses the spell Chronostasis to capture the different chains coming at him. So Asta reflects the chains back at the chain mage, but it doesn't seem too effective as he's able to block it with his own chains. This is where he goes for the mage and he's super close up, and because of his physical strength, he goes and punches him. Now this is actually pretty effective as he wasn't really expecting him to do that. Now keep in mind that Asta at this point is pretty fast enough to blitz the chain mage at this point. And with him connecting with the punch to his face, I think it'd be enough for him to knock him out. This is where the rest of the people that were there would be free, and later on the chain mage would get arrested. This would also be a part in where Asta would get a new spell as he went through a traumatic kind of, experience. This was his first combat experience in real life, not in training, so it would make sense that he would get another spell here. Now for this one, I think it would basically be just a general kind of beam that ages things up, kind of how Julius does. Now I don't have a particular name for this, but it's just going to be a kind of beam. After that, this is where the kind of 10 months of their training goes in. Now this training period is going to be similar to how it is in the manga, with both of them not really going to be together when they train as they have that kind of rivalry, but because Asta has magic within this, his training would be a little bit different. Seeing that his physical abilities helped out a lot, especially when he didn't have that many spells at the beginning, he would still continue his physical training, but he doesn't have that sword to train with, so his progress with strength training wouldn't be as fast as he has no real way to increase that other than calisthenics, which is just basically exercises that have to do with the bodies, like push-ups and sit-ups, things like that. But obviously this is where Asta would meet the older man with the red hair, that being Fenzel Kruger. And this is where he teaches him more about magic, obviously as he was an instructor for the Diamond Kingdom. With the basics of magic known to Asta, he's able to do things a lot better. He's able to control his magic a lot more than usual, than normal people, I should say, as Yuno doesn't really need that, as wind magic is the best magic that's connected to the mana, has the strongest connection to it, I should say, and that's why he doesn't really need that much control at first and doesn't really need that training. But Asta does, as his magic is very, volatile at this stage, and with this, Fenzel gives the idea of Asta to kind of use a tool to use his magic with. It's the same concept in where Noelle uses a wand to control her magic, but with Asta, he uses a stick, and this is where he gains another spell, and that being the Time Cutter. I talked about this one in the other series, but so we're going to bring it back. With the Time Cutter, he's able to basically cut things in half, but not in the orthodox way, I should say. The way that it cuts is that it ages things within the cutting line or the blade, and this makes it age to the point of frailty, and with the normal amount of force that Asta would put down, it cuts it in half. So on the surface it looks like a clean cut, but in reality it's basically like severing it through time. With this, Asta learns the basics of swordsmanship, in particular longer swords. Now this sword that Asta creates would be a lot different than his normal sword. It wouldn't really weigh that much, and for this case I think there would need a catalyst for it to work, and by that I mean some sort of handle. So the handle would be physical, but the actual blade would be made out of his actual magic. So this is where Fenzel would give him some money to go and buy one when he gets to the capital. Now this is quite a bit of change, as there's just a lot of money that you need to get something in the capital. So with that said, this is where they would get to the part and where they would go to the capital. Now the entire incident with Vanzel and his student having to betray him would still happen, and Asta would be there to kind of help, but it really wouldn't change much, so we're not going to really talk about it. They're at the capital. They're astonished by the different things that are there and how big it is in general because they come from a small village. There they go in line and they get their number for the Magic Knight exam. In line, Asta would be ridiculed for having so little amount of pages together. At this point, they would still be in a kind of spiral shape, kind of like the Wizard Kings, but obviously not as full, so it wouldn't be that much in general, and that is why he's getting ridiculed. So after that, this is where they get into the courtyard, and this is where everyone is kind of being assaulted by the anti-birds, or the anti-magic birds. So no birds would really go on to Yuno or Asta except for one, that being Nero. Now, in the original series, Nero came to Asta because he had the grimoire, but I would say in this case she would go to Asta and Yuno because of how the magic feels, particularly with Yuno, as he still has some traces of his elf reincarnation, and Asta, well, he has such a unique grimoire that she feels that he can really do something for the cause. So she decides to go with Asta, as she would want to observe the child of Licht, or the reincarnation, from a distance. And because these two are so close to each other, she knows that these two would meet up in the future. So here I would say, so around this time I think Asta would meet up with Yami, but I don't think it would be in a confrontational way, just how it was in canon, but instead I guess admiration, in a kind of way I guess would be admiration. This is because Asta would not bump into Yami because of the anti-birds, but instead just find him there, just standing within the crowd. Yami would still get annoyed by this, as he doesn't really want to talk to them, and I guess this is the point where he would try to threaten Asta, but before he could really get anything out, this is where the actual exam starts. Now, within this exam, Asta does pretty well, just like Yuno. I don't think he would have the same control as Yuno, even at this point, so things like the flight test wouldn't be as highly scored as Yuno, but everything else would pretty much be the same, even things like marksmanship and things like that. So when they get into the battle, Seke, that being the person with bronze magic that you meet at the beginning, would be more hesitant to fight Asta, but I think Asta would want to have him be the partner just because no one else would, and Seke would be kind of nice to Asta because they would meet up with each other just how they would in canon because of their numbers. So what would happen is Seke would be more defensive than he was in canon and wouldn't be as cocky because of, well, Asta's magic. Now this fight isn't as, I guess, instigated by Seke, just like what I said before, and because of that, both of them use their kind of magics to their fullest. Now Seke isn't knocked out as fast just because Asta in canon was mad and therefore just instantly one-shotted him, but I would say in this one Asta would take a little bit of his time, and once he got close to Seke, this is where Seke would activate his bronze magic, but it really wouldn't do much against Asta's time cutter being able to go through it. And what would happen is that Asta would kind of curve the blade, so he would go down vertically, and then once it was actually in the shell, this is when he would twist it so it would go on its side. So it would go vertically and it would go on its side, and the flat side, this is where Asta would hit him there. Because there's no real weight to the sword, it wouldn't do that much damage, and it would basically shatter the bronze creation that he did. And this is where Asta would use his time magic to basically capture Seke, giving him the win. Now the captains would be impressed by this, as he was able to beat Seke relatively fast, who is a noble by the way, as well as having this strange magic. Not only that, but he did it in the most reasonable way that you would want a captain to do, and that is to capture your opponent. Now we get into the kind of choosing process. Now, I'll give an explanation on why certain captains don't go for Asta and go off from there. Now, first off, the Silver Eagles, that be Nozel, as well as the Crimson Lions, so Fragolion, both of them do not choose Asta. And the reason for this is that Nozel has this kind of prejudgment or discrimination against peasants, and therefore doesn't have Asta join. For Fragolion, his power is relatively unknown, and that makes him very uncertain, which makes him drop Asta and not pick him. This is the same case that happened within the series, and the reason why Asta didn't go with the Crimson Lions is because his power was unknown, just in this case, and therefore wasn't trusted. Now, let's get to the Golden Dawn. Now, William does not pick Asta because his magic reminds him of the Wizard King, and therefore is a kind of, I guess, obstacle for Partry/Licht. And because of that, he doesn't want him to join the Magic Knights, and therefore become a problem for them in the future. And also, with him being on the Golden Dawn, he would prosper and probably become stronger, which he doesn't want. Seeing that these three squads don't pick him, this makes the other squads lose confidence within themselves to pick him, because if these guys don't want him, even though he's shown so much promise, maybe there's something that they're seeing that they're not, and therefore don't get him. The only person who does raise their hand for Asta, and this is immediate and not after a bit, and that is Yami. Yami sees the potential within Asta and knows Julius's magic very well, as he was also the captain of his squad when he was younger, and he sees Julius within Asta, especially within his magic. He raises his hand and Asta joins the Black Bulls. Asta, not really knowing much about the different captains, is excited anyways. It's only later until he finds out that the Black Bulls are known to be the worst Magic Knight squad. Everyone else would go to their relative squads within canon, so Asta with the Black Bulls, Yuno with the Golden Dawn, and Seke with the Prayed Mantises. So we could skip ahead, and this was where they're introduced to the hideout. Asta does the baptism that Magna would want him to do, and it basically proves to everyone that he's worthy of joining the Black Bulls. The way that he would, well, basically do this is the physical stuff he'd be able to do pretty easily, or at least slightly harder than he would be in canon, but still pretty easy. After that, this is where the different, I guess, fireballs would be shot at Asta, and Asta would be able to dodge this relatively easily, and this is where Magna would use his ultimate kind of like spell. Now Asta would just use Chronostasis to capture it and send it back to him, and Magna would almost die because of this, but he would be able to dispel it before it would get to him. After this is where we could skip a few hours until it's daytime again, and Asta is shown all the chores that he would have to do for being in the Black Bulls. After that, this is where they would meet Noelle, and she would basically be very prideful on her royal lineage and talk about how she's better than the Black Bulls and that she doesn't really deserve to be in this place. Asta at first would recognize her nobility, or I guess royalty, but quickly would assess that they're on the same team, so he doesn't have to do that. This is where Noelle would get mad and try to shoot a water kind of ball at them, missing and hitting Magna. She would storm off, and eventually we would come to the point in where she would be training in the woods by herself, and Asta would be there to see what was up. This in itself would freak her out and make her lose control of her magic. With such amount of magic being released at once, the entire squad would notice. This is where Yami would find himself in quite the situation, not knowing exactly what to do, but Asta lands by him and he gets an idea. He's going to combine all three of their magics in succession, so not a combo spell, but using one after the other. So this is how it goes. Finral opens a portal next to Noelle. This is where Yami comes in and uses his black hole spell, being able to absorb some of the water that's there. Asta then uses his spell, Chronostasis, to capture Noelle. This causes the magic around her to dispel, as there's no more of a source to give off that magic, saving the day and no one really getting hurt in the process. Yami was surprised that Asta was able to keep up and gains a bit of respect for him. This is where Noelle thinks that they're gonna laugh at her, and Asta basically tells her that she had incredible magic. It was such a large amount that he didn't see a possible way that they would be able to get her. And he tells Noelle that he also had a problem controlling his magic when he first got his grimoire, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. But he spent the 10 months to really train on that, and he used a physical object to help focus his magic, and he shows her the kind of handle that he would have got during the area, or I guess the capital. With this, she trusts the Black Bulls a lot more, as they didn't really make fun of her but instead tried to help her. Now we could skip ahead, and this is where they go on their first mission, because they have to do the boar hunting for Saucy Village. Asta, Noelle, and Magna go there. Now with Asta having some control over his magic, he would take Noelle and Magna would ride by himself. Because of this, Magna would not have to expel so much magic to carry all three of them, so they would get there a lot faster and have some time to spare. They would get more boars than usual, and because of this, they arrive at the same time as they normally would. Because of that, there is this fog all around the area. They don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem natural. So what they do is they fly over and try to find the town square, and that's where they land. Here they see that there is a bunch of mages taking the city, or I guess village, hostage. The group quickly realize who is behind this attack, as mages with the strange cloaks come forward. It turns out that these are members of the Midnight Sun. They tell the Magic Knights what they're doing, what their plans are, and their philosophy behind it. They describe the peasants there as animals, as they have little to no magical power. Asta's just having none of this, and they could already tell that they killed someone, that being the village chief. Angry by this, Asta and Magna want to defend them, with Noelle staying in the back as she cannot really control her power at this point, at least not to the same extent as she can later on in the series. Now with Asta having time magic, it's really easy at this point, because he would have learned how to use things like reinforcement magic and the ability to just kind of seemingly teleport, being able to accelerate time in that instance. Now reinforcement magic isn't really a spell per se. There are spells that do reinforce it, but those are like really specific. But general reinforcement magic can be used by pretty much anyone, and you just need to learn how to use it. Kind of like how Mana Skin is and Mana Zone. It's the same type of concept. Now the mages, not wanting to get off schedule, decide to attack Asta and the rest of the group using their ice magic, or at least the main mage does so. Asta's easily able to just use Chronostasis to stop the attacks from coming. Now the mage here is confused on what is happening. He tells Asta, if you have so much magic, why even care about protecting these people? And this is where Asta tells him his dream about becoming the Wizard King, and to become the Wizard King, he's gonna have to protect his future citizens. Now, the mage doesn't really care about this and tells him, well, it doesn't look like you're gonna have that dream because you're gonna die tonight in about maybe 10 minutes, as he's trying to be punctual. Asta, hearing this, basically reflects the ice that he's captured already using Chronostasis. As this happens, the mage uses an ice wall to basically block them. Seeing that now he can reflect them, he is less likely to shoot back at Asta. This is at the same time in where Magna, not being as tired as he was in canon, is actually using his fire magic. Now because he has a lot more reserves, the power dynamic that they had in canon isn't the same because he has more reserves now. In canon, although he had the advantage when it comes to magical types, he didn't have enough magic, as well as his magic in general not being as strong as the Ice Mage. With the inclusion of Asta here, having magic, he can basically win a fight of stamina here, or mana. So what's happening is the Ice Mage is on the defensive, while Asta goes in there closer using his Time Cutter, and Magna is basically there for support, shooting at range to not let the Ice Mage have any opening. So at the same time as this happening, the other mages come up with a plan to take out the rest of the villagers, and this is where they use their magics, as they have different types as shown. This includes water as well as mist magic, and they try to use this to go and kill the other villagers there. It doesn't work, as although Noelle is not really useful at this point in terms of using her magic, she does get an awakening here just solely on the fact that she wants to protect these people, and because her squad mates are trying so vigorously to protect these people, and the fact that she's in the middle of everyone getting all their attention basically, she has this awakening moment in where she learns a new spell, that being Sea Dragon's Lair, I believe the spell is, the kind of dome that she has. This helps protect the other villagers there, and this lets Asta and Magna go forward with their plans of taking out the mages, as before they were kind of stuck being somewhat close to the other villagers. So with this freedom, it lets them take out the mages relatively fast and with less damage than it was in canon. So it's a lot faster and they're not as harmed as much. Magna uses his snaring magic to basically imprison all of them, just so that they could take them back to the capital to ask them questions. Like in canon, they would use their magical device to basically end their lives, with only one of them really surviving and leaving due to his magic. With this, they made the report, and Asta's angry at the fact that they just basically committed suicide, and not only that, but it was forced upon them because of their leader. After this, they grieve with the villagers there, and they decide to give them the magic stone, which Nero takes, as Nero has been with Asta up to this point. So later on, they make the report to the capital, and they recognize the Midnight Sun as a terrorist group. Now we could skip a few days after Asta and Noelle have basically gotten to know each other and the rest of the squad members. This is where they get onto their next mission. Because of the different stories and reports that the Wizard King has heard about Asta, he's very interested in him and decides to let him and his squad go to the recently discovered dungeon with the Golden Dawn and Yuno. In this adventure, they would bring the regular people, that being Noelle, Asta, and Luck, as Luck really needed something to do, and Magna was, well, still grieving. And obviously Noelle and Asta need the experience. Sometime later, Finral teleports the group to the dungeon, and a quick little difference between this and canon is that Asta has a better time navigating through the dungeon, as he has magic which lets him use his magic sensing. In the actual main part of the dungeon, and where you see the mana flowing from different sides of the room, Asta is about to take a step forward, and then something flashes in his eye, and then he stops. For some reason, he feels like there's going to be danger nearby, and this is when Luck notices it, and he notices the traps all around the ground, and he activates them for fun. And this is where Noelle uses her magic to defend Asta and herself. Now Asta here isn't using Ki, but instead a kind of passive ability with his time magic. He has the ability to see danger within a second ahead of him. So think of this as some sort of, not exactly precognition or things like that, but it's only like a second to half a second into the future to let him get that kind of one up on things. After this is done, this is where Luck basically finds this strange magic. It's very large and he goes in that direction. This is obviously the Shining General with the smoke magic. Left by themselves, Noelle and Asta continue going forward. With no real way of navigating, they don't really know where to go. This is when Nero comes, as she has been with Asta. She navigates the areas so that they have a good understanding of where to go. Eventually this is where Noelle would have triggered a trap, but Asta saves her, and because of this, she gets kind of flustered as she didn't expect Asta to kind of push her out of the way. Asta uses his Chronostasis to trap the trap, I guess, and so it doesn't get triggered. This is when the Golden Dawn come by, this including Yuno, Klaus, and Mimosa. Yuno and Asta get a chance to catch up, and Asta shows Yuno that his grimoire has been growing every day, as before it was one single page. Yuno, in his thoughts, is shocked. He didn't think it would do that. He's never seen a grimoire like that. He's never heard of a grimoire like that. So he's shocked in the inside, but on the outside he portrays a more calm and controlled kind of look. Now, the reason why he's shocked is because with something like his grimoire and other grimoires, there are a limited amount of pages and they're already blank. But with Asta, he just continuously gets more pages, and he doesn't know whether there's a finite amount of pages that he'll get or if there's unlimited. So getting back to how he portrays himself outside or to others, he stays calm and tells Asta, well, you only have a couple pages, you're not going to be able to beat me with that. And Asta says, well, it'll start growing. And with this, both Asta and Yuno continue talking as Mimosa and Noelle catch up as well. With this, they have the same conversation that they do in canon, talking about how Noelle had trouble with her magic at an early age, and Klaus is confused and how they know each other, that being Asta and Yuno, and they talk about how they were orphaned at the same church and things like that. And Klaus is also interested in his grimoire, as it, like I said before, it's coverless and only has a couple pages. But at this point, if you guys want to know the general shape of it, it's in the same shape as the Wizard King's, but obviously not as dense. It's very few pages in number, and Klaus is like, he's confused, and he tells Asta, is that even a grimoire? And he says, of course, look at it, and he sees that it floats and he has different spells and everything like that. So Klaus pushes up his glasses and he remembers the fact that he was sent on this mission. Now he tells Asta and Noelle that there's no need for them to be here, as the Golden Dawn can handle it themselves. Now Asta gets kind of mad at this and tells him that the Wizard King himself had chosen him to come to this dungeon. Now Klaus tries to call him out on this, but he continues to proclaim this as true. With this, they have the kind of wager of seeing who could get to the special room of the dungeon first, or the treasure room I should say. Asta takes him up on this bet, and the Golden Dawn basically leave, with Mimosa having a map of the area using her plant magic. Asta and Noelle, using the help of Nero, find their own path to get to the treasure room as well. On their way there, they see or feel the magic power of two people fighting. This is Luck and the Shining General. Asta decides to go back for him, as he's a squad member and wants his squad to survive. Not only that, but he feels like they're already friends, given that they're on the same squad. When they get there, they see that Luck is having trouble with the mage, or the general. Asta intervenes using his time cutter, hitting it with the flat side so that he wouldn't hurt the general too bad, as Asta at this point doesn't want to kill anyone, and if he were to hit him with the actual bladed edge, he would have killed him. But because Asta is so fast, faster than Luck at this point, and faster than most people at this point, the general can't really keep up with that speed, so he uses the clouds around him to kind of suck a little bit of Asta's magic away, as well as cloud his vision. With this being done, Luck is somewhat mad and tells Asta to stay out of it, as he's the one who has to defeat him by himself, remembering what his mom had said to him before when she was alive. Asta basically doesn't care and says that he's doing this because they're squad mates and they're friends. He needs to help them out, or else what kind of Wizard King would he be if he can't even help out his own squad members? After this, they come up with a plan to basically corner the mage, with Asta only having his actual sight to help him out because his magic sensing would have been clouded. He is kind of in a tough situation here. So they have Luck shoot out his electricity at the mage just so he doesn't cannon, and as Asta is trying to see where he will pop up next, Noelle as well would shoot out her own magic because it's unpredictable and where it would go. Since she can't really control it, neither can the mage. So although it is uncontrollable, he can't really predict it. This is when Asta sees an opportunity and uses his time magic to accelerate himself using reinforcement magic and hits him with the side of his blade, pushing him to a wall and basically making a crater within the wall. After that's done, this is where the group heads back to find the group, that being the Golden Dawn, and they see that they're fighting another person. This is obviously Mars with his crystal magic. So Asta joins the fight as Yuno was really just about to die. Asta uses his time cutter on the crystal statues, but it doesn't seem that effective as crystals take thousands or even millions of years to be formed. So something like this time wouldn't really affect them that well. So it's almost like a counter for the time cutter in that sense. So Asta has to rely on his physical strength. Not only that, but also his other spells. So Asta basically starts teleporting forward as Mars would try to attack him with the different clones, not being able to really, hit him. This is where Mars would try to use the different daggers to try to attack him, and Asta would just use Chronostasis to reflect them back at him. This is where Mars creates the kind of giant suit of armor made out of the crystals. Asta, seeing no real way to get past this because the crystals are resilient to his time magic, decides to basically gain enough momentum to hit him directly in his face because that's the only real part that's not, covered. So this is what Asta does. With everyone else fighting the crystal kind of clones, he starts using his magic to teleport around and kind of make himself faster until he has enough momentum and he tries to hit Mars. Mars uses his armor to block it using his hands, kind of like a boxer. But Asta, seeing this, he would use a lot of reinforcement magic into his hand so that it would be basically glowing at this point with just all of his magic. Kind of like how Marileona and other kind of brawlers do in Black Clover, when they just put a bunch of magic within their hand to kind of protect it a bit. And he punches through the crystal and hits Mars on the other side, knocking him out. This is where Klaus uses his binding magic and everything is secured. After this, what happens is that they have to find a way through the door. So Asta, using his time magic, decides to see if he could age the door up. He makes a beam with his hand and he focuses it on one spot, and eventually it drills through it, makes a outline of a door to basically open it that way. Once they get inside, they see a bunch of treasure from different ages in time, including magical items, scrolls, and even a bunch of gold in general. Obviously, this is where Yuna would find the wind spirit itself, but he wouldn't really use it just yet. But there would be this giant glow, and he would unlock her later on. Asta himself would also find a scroll, and this is where he finds the time spirit. Now, it's been kind of stated that there's really only 4 spirits within Black Clover. Not really directly, but it has been implied, and these are the 4 gray elements, that being earth, wind, fire, and water. So we don't really know if there would be other spirits, but let's just say for this what if that there is, and let's say that there's one for each element, whether they be strong or weak. So he doesn't really know what to do with it, but he will later unlock it. Sometime later, this is when Mars would awaken again, using his other side of his magic that he got from the Diamond Kingdom, which lets him use flame recovery magic. Because of this, he's able to get a sneak attack on both Noelle and Asta. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what about his ability to see into the future? Well, he did so, but it's only a half a second. Now, he only saw that something dangerous was going to happen to Noelle, but not himself, and therefore, when he tried to react to that, he didn't account for himself being in danger as well, and that's what got him knocked away. Now, Noelle is in a critical state, and Asta just got knocked through a wall, with the others being kind of trapped within Crystal. Mimosa is tending to Noelle's wounds, but she can't really focus on anything else as the cuts were really bad, especially on Noelle. So Asta is knocked through a wall and he sees something weird. It's a strange sword and he doesn't know why it's there, but Nero stands on top of it. He sees this and he thinks it might be a perfect weapon to use against Mars. He touches it and it's kinda heavy. Heavier than anything he's really lifted as a weapon before, but he also notices something, that this weapon is draining his magic, and he sees this and he wonders what it can use it for. So Asta, taking advantage of this, he takes off his jacket and his shirt and he wraps it around the hilt of the sword so he wouldn't have direct contact with the sword. But even then, it's still taking some of his magic, but not as much as it was before, so there's a slow drain at this point, and he rushes towards Mars. Now, Asta at this point isn't really drained of much magic, as he wasn't really trying to fight for that long, as someone like Yuno or Klaus was when they were going against the crystal clones. Now, Asta takes his sword, and with his time magic, he's able to predict and react to all the different swords that would come his way, and he uses it in a way to basically hit the daggers right back at Mars, which doesn't really do much. So Mars creates this giant kind of sword, and Asta basically uses the sword to cut right through it. Because of that, he goes past that and goes directly for Mars, who's still in the crystal armor. Asta's able to slice through it, and this is where he gets knocked out. After this, the area becomes unstable, and basically what happens is they have to leave as fast as possible. Asta, using his jacket again, takes the sword with him as he sees it as a powerful weapon that he could use in the future. Now, I'm not gonna make him be able to use it directly, but it's gonna be something important to the plot later on. And with this, Yuno gets everyone out of there using his transportation magic, and Asta is on the verge of fainting as he's used most of his magic at this point, getting drained by the anti-magic sword. On the outside, this is where Klaus thanks the two young rookies for defending them and basically saving the day. He apologizes to Asta for being rude, and he wonders about this new sword. Asta tells him that he doesn't really know how it works, but it drains magic and he can't really hold it directly for too long or else he'll drain all this magic. Not only that, but it also nullifies and reflects magic really well. Klaus is somewhat curious of this but doesn't continue on. With this, the mission is over and they're able to loot the dungeon of some of its most precious items. So we would skip about a few days, and this is when Asta basically is fully recovered, and so is Noelle and the rest of the groups. Now Asta is recruited to go to see the Wizard King and to this banquet. Now Asta is kind of excited for this as he's get to see the Wizard King. Not only that, but he's also getting another star for his squad. So Noelle and Asta head out for the capital, getting Finral to basically teleport them there. Once there, they find the other squad, that being the Golden Dawn, and they meet up again for this event. Asta now having the sword on his back, but this time wrapped with more and more cloth than before, as it slowly drains a little bit of his magic. He was the only one there that could really lift it, as the others would struggle with it or not be able to do it at all. Eventually they get to the Wizard King and they show him this anti-magic sword. He's never seen anti-magic before and is really intrigued by it. He tells Asta that this sword is completely unique and there's nothing like it, at least not yet. He tells him that it has no magic at all, which Asta didn't really think about as a possibility. Now, I know that some people might say that, oh, anti-magic is a type of magic, but it really isn't. And I've said this multiple times, and it is in the series multiple times stated that it's not magic, but I digress. After hearing this, the Wizard King wants to lift it himself, and he tries to, but it's really heavy, and it drains his magic as well. Now, after that, he wants to talk about his grimoire, and that being Asta. He had heard that Asta had time magic, and he goes and looks at his grimoire, and he tells Asta that he has a similar grimoire to his, something that has no cover, and he asks Asta if he'd like to see it. Asta, excited at this opportunity, says yes, and keep in mind that they're on a tower right now, and he tells Asta to look up into the sky, and he is confused for a second, but he goes along with it, and he sees in the sky this giant cylinder looking object, and he realizes that that's the grimoire, and he can't believe what he's seeing. He's thinking to himself, if Asta has the same magic as the Wizard King and has the same type of grimoire, is it possible that he'll have the same level of skill as the Wizard King? And almost loses confidence with himself, but then he reinsures himself as he sees Asta smiling, and he tells the Wizard King, how do you become the Wizard King? Now he tells him the 3 priorities for the Wizard King. First off is merit, so you need to prove that you're worthy of the title. Next, you need to have the trust of the people. It's something that's earned and not really given. Next is that he needs power. You need to be stronger than all of the current captains to become the Wizard King. He tells him this, and both of them smile, thinking that they can become the Wizard King. After this, he asked them if they would like to see the ceremony with the different members of each squad being promoted. Obviously, this is a request of the Wizard King, and they accept. There, they get to see all different squad members from different squads get their promotions. And after that is done, they get the banquet, and where Asta basically gorges himself on different foods there. Here, they would have the same conflict that they would do normally, and that is with Noelle getting water poured on by her brother, Solid. Here, Asta stands up for her, and the others there retaliate by trying to show some discipline to Asta. Asta, using his time magic, isn't really able to be taken down. In fact, it's him who shoots back their magic at them using time magic. This is where Fragolion realizes how powerful Asta is. He steps in a lot sooner than he does, and he tells them that they're cowards for basically trying to attack one person, and not only that, but a teenager at that. They should be ashamed of themselves because not only are they magic knights, but they're kind of high ranking. This is where Leopold actually comes in and is excited to meet Asta, as Mimosa was telling him all about it. Asta gets to meet Leopold, and they kind of have this awkward conversation or exchange, and Leopold basically declares Asta as his rival. After this, Noelle is kind of disgusted at the fact that a royal would declare a peasant to be their rival. This is where Fragolion gets kind of mad, as he sees it as disrespectful. But before they could really continue their argument or their fight, this is where the capital is actually under attack. So Fragolion takes charge of the situation and has one of the mages create a map of the city and how it looks right now. Asta, not feeling like they're going fast enough, decides to head out as they're talking, people on the streets are dying from the attacks. So he heads out by himself. Leopold, seeing how passionate Asta is, decides to follow. With this, Fergolion says that each squad needs to kind of split up, and he lets them head out in the directions that he said that they should go. He follows Asta and Leopold to keep them safe, as they're still rookies. Now Asta in this is really doing well, better than he would have normally, as he has range thanks to his magic, and not only that, but he one-shots all of the zombies. Being able to use these kind of time beams, which I mentioned earlier, like near the beginning, although it's a nameless spell, it's still effective as it ages the zombies to dust. And on his kind of path, this is where he would find Rades threatening a little girl. Here he would intervene so that she would not get hurt. This is where Rades uses his summons. First up would be his number 4, and that would be Jimmy. Now Asta has no difficulty at all. He basically one-shots Jimmy using the beam and ages Jimmy until he's dust. Rades, seeing this, gets scared and decides to use all of his summons, at least the ones that we know so far, that being number 3, this is the one with mud magic, the number 2 being Alfred, the one that kind of flies with no limbs and has electricity, and then also number 1, that being Carl. Now, the way that I would see this going is that he would basically one-shot number 3 and number 2 really easily, as they're not really fast and there's not much they could do against his time magic. But number 1 would be kind of hard to go against, as his defense is a lot higher than the others, as he uses magic to create a barrier and therefore doesn't really get a pure shot from Asta. This is around the time where Fergolion would come by and see how well Asta's doing. Here he would give Asta some advice, talking about finding the weak spot within someone's armor. This is where Asta uses his magic sensing to see when the summon shoots. He's able to see that there is some sort of dip in where the magic is. So when it shoots, the magic becomes weaker in a certain area, and therefore this is where Asta plans to attack. So the barrage that the character uses at first seems very threatening, but Asta just uses Chronostasis and shoots it back at him. Now Rades is shocked and he doesn't know what's happening. He's like, what type of magic does this kid have? Because he's never seen anything like this, and time magic isn't really, I guess, common at all, because only one character has it. So he doesn't know what's happening, but he starts to lose hope and he gets angry, and this is where eventually Asta finds the weak spot and destroys his other summoning. Fergolion comes in and uses a binding spell on Rades. This is where he looks at his grimoire, only having 1 page, and this is where the other magic knights are teleported away, and the second part of the Midnight Sun's plan starts to happen. Fergolion gets teleported, and this is where he loses an arm, because the Midnight Sun were after his pendant, which is a magic stone. So with Fergolion having his arm cut off, he's bleeding profusely, and this is where Asta uses his time magic to make a kind of, I guess, chronostasis around his arm to stop the bleeding for now, but it's not gonna last too long. He needs medical attention, and they don't know when they could get that. Alright, so this is gonna be the end for this video. I hope you guys like it. I'm not sure how long it's gonna be, as the raw audio is gonna be different from the edited. So yeah, if you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS so I know you support the channel. But I hope you guys liked this video. It took a bit to make, as I wanted to basically catch up with the other series, that being the first or original series that I made on this, and so that there wouldn't be so much time. And I wanted to make a longer what if, as I haven't really done that in quite a bit. So if you guys like this video, please give it a like I said before. And yeah, we gotta thank the patrons over on Patreon. So if you want to join the Patreon, it only costs $1 and you have a chance to get one of my drawings. I'll show a picture of last month's drawing, that being March, and yeah, And if you want a higher chance of getting a drawing from me, you could go to the other tiers, which are $5 and $10 respectively. There you have a higher chance of getting a drawing from me. And yeah, so let's give out the shout out. So in our gold tier we have Kenny, Dwayne, Finn, and Lyko. So if you want to join them and be a patron, the link will be in the description. So with that being said, this is going to be the new video, and yeah.